fellow citizens. There are strong controversies involved. I would just refer you to the latest Eurobarometer, which has been published, showing a growing number of Europeans are concerned about this. And it's a subject that's not just important for Europeans, but also important from an international level. And I'm delighted, Madam, to welcome you here with us today. I may not shock anyone with the quote I'll be making in a moment, but when we look at the recent revelations from WikiLeaks about the international importance of the subject of GMOs in the American EU discussions, it is a subject of great concern. We also talk about patents, intellectual property rights, the fact that specifically GMOs allow for patenting a living organism, which hasn't been possible up till now. So all of these are subjects of great concern to us. So there are many points to discussion. Are they of interest for who? Do they represent profits for whom? Would other agricultural practices have greater or lesser interest in ensuring food safety? What are the costs of contamination to the traditional and organic sectors? What about the ethical discussions on the research choices? All of that is very interesting, but is not part of our subject today. Our aim today is both very simple and very complex. In fact, that's the issue of risk assessment. Risk assessment, as you know, in Europe is organized by Directive 2001/18 and in particular Annex 2 thereof. This stipulates a whole series of assessments to be made on risks in the short, medium and long term, on direct and indirect effects of genetically modified organisms, the application of the precautionary principle, amongst others. As you know, with regard to putting into crop of GMO, there's the first information given to the other member states and the Commission. If there's a disagreement to that, then EFSA carries out the assessment. Now, it's depending on how EFSA interprets these regulations and applies them is what is the subject of our debate. In 2008, the Council, in fact, demanded reinforcement of the risk assessment procedures, better take into account of the impacts of certain GMOs, better taking into account certain uncertainties as well. Since 2008, EFSA has been working on drafting up new guidelines regarding risk assessments for the neighboring environment, as well as for health in general. Now, these guidelines, are they a better progress for the application of European legislation, or on the contrary, do they represent a step backwards from existing practices which are considered to be insufficient by certain member states? This is something that we'll be discussing extremely openly and calmly today. And I'll finish up by saying, because we all have to be very concise today, I'm delighted to see that we're going to have a rather contradictory debate today. I'm amongst those who defend a public expertise with a comparing debate. That's the best way to ensure the greatest information passes to the decision makers. A consensus, silent in addition, does not allow the decision makers to work in the best conditions possible. So, first of all, for the citizens and their trust in their institutions, and then for the decision makers, this open comparison is necessary. We also need to ensure that there's a lack of conflict of interest. We're in Brussels. I won't get into the French discussions, but quite often the issue of expertise and the experts' conditions and the links between experts and private interests is a growing concern. And the reform of this has become something of great importance. If we don't want to destroy the confidence of our citizens in our experts and indeed in the decision makers, we have got to be able to have expertise which can be without question regarding the procedure and those who carried it out. I'd like to thank all of the speakers, including the members of EFSA, for agreeing to participate in this. Unfortunately, none of the GMO panel was able to be with us today because of their busy agendas, and I can certainly understand them. I do find it unfortunate, however, because I think that would have provided a great impetus to our discussion. So priority will be given to our scientific speakers, but we do also need time for debate. So George and I will be trying to stick to our timetable fairly strictly. And given that Commissioner Dalli will honour us with his presence as well, and will only be here around 5 o'clock, once he does arrive, I suggest that the four speakers take the floor again briefly to explain what they've said, so that he is aware of what's been said and not then launch into what he has to say without knowing what has gone before. And I think that would be preferable to our debate. Now, George, I'm delighted to pass you the floor. Well, it remains for George, Lyon and myself to conclude. Since I started, George will finish. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your words. I'll come back to them in a moment. Please be reassured, I'm going to impose the same rule on myself as I did to others, 5 minutes. So, again, thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you to our speakers. I think everything that's been said has been important, and I'd like to thank the audience for the quality of the questions and the quality of the debate. I mean, some said, well, how on earth are we going to organize a debate? It's going to be very heated, there won't be organized, no one will agree, or be able to say things in words and a tone that remains courteous and allows for the debate to make progress. But I would like to thank you, because I think thanks to all of you, it was possible. Mr. Commissioner, I entirely agree with your words, and I'd thank you for the significant progress that you mentioned today. The subject of contradictory expertise, which for me and many others is a very important issue, and the fact that we allow for long-term studies, the making available of seeds for research purposes, which today is impossible. And what you said about the participation of other researchers. Also, what you said about managing conflicts of interest, which is an extremely important issue. All of that, I think, responds to many concerns we have all expressed, and I thank you for your comments on that. You also said that we have to get out of this impasse. I think we all agree on that. I mean, if we met today, that was our aim. There's no goodwill and badwill on one side or the other. There are people with different approaches to the same subject, but probably common concerns. That is, to do things well. Perhaps the order of priorities are not necessarily the same. Some feel that health, consumers' health and the quality of the environment must take precedence. Others feel that economic development and research are absolutely essential so that we don't become, as you referred to, Madam, marginalized. 3 points. To get out of the impasse, we've got to convince public opinion. You have a majority of European consumers who don't want them, and this is growing. There's a petition from 1 million persons that has been filed. I know there are debates about this petition. Nonetheless, that is the first subject on which the Europeans decided to apply the new provisions of the treaty. I mean, that's not a neutral issue. That means that this is a subject that is extremely politically important for our citizens. Therefore, if we want to get out of the impasse, it is going to be through working with our citizens, by perhaps trying to demonstrate, maybe we'll succeed, maybe we won't, but that's the issue, that the way in which they feel their interests, that is their health, their freedom to consume, their freedom to use their space, are entirely respected, and that is the main objective. Second point, the debate on the guidelines. That was open today. You said yourself, Mr. Commissioner, we will have other opportunities to discuss them. Well, these guidelines have got to represent progress. Mrs. Lepage said there is progress on the one hand, but there's concerns on the other. The definition you gave of the substantial equivalence principle, if it's set as low at the beginning, to move on from there, and if it's set on very low at the beginning to block any progress, that's another thing. But yes, I agree, we need to decide on the definitions. That is something very important. The analysis of long-term effects and the receiving environments, that's very important and something we've got to get into, because this debate has demonstrated that there is great concern about these subjects. Secondly, the trust in the expertise. Several times, Mr. Commissioner, you talked about your responsibility. We all, as decision makers, you more than anyone else, because your name goes on the signature line. But we also are part of those who have individual and collective responsibility in this whole issue. And to be able to carry out this responsibility, we need to rely on expertise that we are entirely confident in, and this confidence is fundamental. For us to have this, this cancer of conflict of interest must be stopped. It's no longer possible. So I'm delighted that you told us that you are working to make progress on this. We cannot allow and continue to allow that people, I'm not talking about independent or not dependent, that's not the issue, but that they be at the same time representing major economic interests and public experts for the decision makers at the European Union level. That's not acceptable, and our citizens don't understand that. And that has, in fact, led to a sort of gangrene with everything, regarding everything that's said, whether it's true or not. So I do thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your will to make progress on this, and I do hope that this debate this afternoon has allowed for some progress to be made in the good direction. Again, thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your openness in your words.